Week 1 of the CFL season is in the books. We're off to week number 2. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 254 of the Canadian Football Countdown, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network and an alternative football network. We got a fun show here for you this evening. We're going to preview week 2, take a look at the major storylines, fantasy players to watch, betting picks for this week's games. We've also got special guest Brandon Sanders, a college fantasy football expert, back with us again this week. For Campus to Canada 3.0, third straight year, we're going to take a look at some college fantasy football stars looking to make an impact in the CFL. We'll bring them in just a second here. First joining me, as usual, the great Trey Colbeck. Trey, you talked all week last week about that Montreal money line. That hit. You started the week off strong. You're pouring the green Kool-Aid here, and I also have to ask how's the keyboard doing after the end of the week?
Oh, that was vodka with green Kool-Aid. Oh, that was a bad idea. Anyway, keyboard's fine, guys. Oh, I haven't chugged vodka like that. I'm a 19-year-old girl. Okay, anyway, that was good, boys. No, good weekend. I can handle the loss on Sunday. Toronto's looking good, and for Cam Dukes looked pretty damn good. Green Kool-Aid in Saskatchewan is sweet. Bombers, they are exactly who I said they were. I'm ready, guys. Week 2.
This show's going off the rails already. I love it. Great start to the show. Adam's away tonight. Mike's away tonight, but let's bring in our guest here. I mentioned him already. Brandon, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, boys. I like my Tito's vodka with cranberry, not with green juice. So shout out to Trey for chugging that like a man. But I'm here, and I'm glad to be on, guys. We get to talk about some players that made a big splash there in the NCAA, there in the American colleges, and see how they're going to pair up in the CFL this season, and see if we can get some more gems out there like we did last season, the season before. So I'm excited.
Yeah, just to recap, what are some of the names we talked about the last? If you are interested, go back and listen to our shows from the last 2 years. It was usually right before the season started. I don't have the episode numbers off the top of my head. And we talked a lot about the differences between the college game and the CFL game. We're not going to rehash that tonight, but we're going to hear the list of players. But you had some pretty good ones for us the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, we had season 1. We had Schoen, which was a good drop there. Of course, season 2, Crum. We had Tyler Snead was another one as well.
Just signed a new contract extension through 2025.
And then there was a guy that showed up mid-season, Jared Stearns, who's on the Roughriders there with that nice green hat that Trey's wearing. Another target stud as well. We didn't get to talk about him last year, but he's another one that had he been on the rosters ahead of time, I definitely would have talked about him as well. So we got some guys that have been really interesting that has already made an appearance in week 1, and then we can talk about their futures here in week 2 and moving forward. So I'm excited.
Right on. We'll bring your fantasy players to know in with our fantasy players to watch as we go through each of the games here tonight, and continue along with our CFL preview content here. We are live tonight on our YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook feeds. Thanks to our presenting sponsor, Game Time TV. You can learn more at GameTimeTV.ca or Facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB. Send in your questions, send in your comments in the live chat. We'll take those throughout the night as well. Before we go any further, we do want to acknowledge that the Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as from Treaty 4 territory, traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nation. If you're looking for additional content also on top of this episode this week, check out the Discord community. The Discord's been lively. It's been on fire over the past week with the return of the CFL season. Lively game chats going on there. Lots of chat around CFL fantasy picks, betting lines, and betting picks in there as well. Brandon's in the Discord as well, so come chat with him over there with us as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you're our Discord NFL Fantasy League champion from this past season.
I did. I used my knowledge of Puka Nakua and finally took down Mike Garrell and took down the championship. I am the NFL champ, and I'm hoping to repeat as well this year, boys. So get ready. It's going to be another dominating season.
Sure. Yeah, bring it on. Save it for September.
I will.
And yeah, playing CFL fantasy stuff, of course, as well. Let's see. I think those are all the main things. Oh yeah, I guess link in the episode description if you want to join the Discord. It's free to join us over there. All right, guys, should we get into our first game of the week here? Thursday night football. God, I love this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday schedule they have during the season for the CFL. 4 straight days of football. Wednesday, we're already looking ahead to Thursday football. It's CFL football all week here. And it kicks off with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers visiting the Ottawa Redblacks. Ottawa's first game of the year. They were on the bye in week number 1. Adam's not here to give us the storylines on air, but he did give us some ahead of time to talk about here. So thanks, Adam, for that. We have we have a ghostwriter now, guys. Like Adam's just writing our stories for us. It's great. The biggest storylines I think here are the debut of Drew Brown as the number 1 starter in Ottawa, conveniently against his former team. That's a pretty juicy storyline there. And on the other side of the ball, a couple of notable pieces missing for the Bombers, and Brady Oliveira and Kenny Lawler both being out due to injury. Let's start with Drew Brown. First game, expectations for him against Winnipeg, Trey?
I'm optimistic. Like, we were looking at that Ottawa depth chart on offense, and man, maybe offensive line could do a little upgrading, but other than that, they have some pretty good receivers. Devontae Williams as a backup running back. Is that what I saw? Right. So,
Devontae Dedmon.
Yeah, Devontae
Williams was the starter who got injured.
Right. Sorry, Devontae Dedmon. But hey, same sentiment. The guy's gonna, he's the backup. Wonder what he could do in there. I'm pretty excited about this Ottawa offense, man. And like Shania says, it can only go up from here, right? They can't be much worse than what they've done the last few years. And I'm looking forward to them doing pretty good. You guys?
Yeah, I'm excited about the debut of Johnny Augustine. Really good value. We'll talk about him about fantasy as well. Like we talked about off camera, we're not sure how Ottawa is going to play out on defense when it comes to the run game. So I'm interested to see how they do and how Augustine does as the major workload and stuff like that as well. So that's the main one too. Also, I think we should talk about, finally, this might be the Dalton Schoen breakout first game of his, of the season on there as well. Lawler. They got some good players. We'll talk about one here, a little bit later as well. But they got a really good depth chart. They got the kid from Connecticut who's actually a national. That was actually Canadian, Clericus and things like that as well. I think he would be some good options for targets. Nice and big dude, but I think this could be a Schoen breakout game as well because he was so close to being in the end zone a few times. Kolaris targets him quite a bit, and with Lawler out as far as like being another option, this could be a Schoen or possibly another Dembski type of situation. So I think a little bit more bounce back as far as like not being as rusty. I think we talked about that in the chat preseason. You got to play some reps, Kolaris. I'm sorry, buddy. I know you're older, but at least get in there for a couple of series and just get the arm loose. That would be great. So maybe we'll hit off the rust and stuff like that. But I'm kind of with the same sentiment as Trey. Like it's okay to be optimistic as far as the bounce back. However, I don't think people are saying that they are the CFL favorite to win. I don't know if that's the case, if I'm being honest with you. I would probably pick Montreal to be the favorites. Or, as he's pointing, the Roughriders look pretty good. I'll be honest with you. They got some good pieces, and we'll talk about those guys later too as well.
Sorry, Mom. Sorry.
And I'm a new Winnipeg fan, so I go in Blue Bombers. I'm not making any excuses. I'm just saying it looks a little rough on the other side of the ball there in the defense. So it's going to be up to the Winnipeg's offense team to keep up and make sure they outscore everybody else, basically.
To me, it was actually like going back to Winnipeg's game against Montreal is the other way around, where I expected the defense to struggle and the offense to some degree, but I was surprised. The defense shut it down pretty good when they got no help at all from the offense in that game. Like Trey's been doing the power rankings over on the social media for us. It did his QB rankings, his team rankings. And truthfully, I agree that like you look at the QBs, who's the only one that had a bad game? And I'd probably say it's Zach Collaros last week, right? Where the offense just could not do anything. Oliveira couldn't run. Collaros couldn't get consistency. When they did move the ball, they threw turnovers in the end zone as he does. But the defense actually shut it down until they probably just ran out of gas later in the game. So, Yeah, that's been the big talk over the last week. Is it, rust from the not playing in the preseason? Is this actually, is Trey finally right about the downfall of the Bombers here, back to a 7-11 record? I think this week will be an interesting one to tell us maybe more in that regard. I expect the team to bounce back because I think they are better than what they were against Montreal. But I don't know if they're bouncing back to last season's quality. Like, I look at this depth chart. You were talking about the guys at wide receiver here, Brandon. Like, it's looking thin. Not going to lie. I feel like it's looking a little thin, the depth chart here in week 2 of the season, where you've got Dalton Schoen, you've got Nick Dembski. Those are your big two. But no Lawler there. Rashid Bailey's gone. You've got Wheat Falls starting at wide receiver in Lawler's place. You've got Ontario Wilson, second career start. Wolotarski's still there. Now you got Augustine getting a rare start at running back. So I feel like the depth chart's looking a little thinner on offense there. So I don't know. I'm not sold necessarily on it there right now. Trey, what do you think about the I think we all know what you think about the Winnipeg side of the offense, but
no, I got a lot to say about
here goes the board.
I don't know. I've never been sold on Augustine. He doesn't have the same pop that we've been accustomed to between Oliveira and Harris. He's a great running back, but I'm not going to believe I'm going to quote Mike, but what does he always say about running backs, right? And I feel Augustine kind of falls more into that category than the game changer like Harris or Oliveira. That being said, I mean, and you're right, that offensive, those receiving cores, it would be nice if we had a guy like Rashid Bailey as our 4th or 5th receiver. It'd be nice if we had guys like that, but when you win 4 straight Western Division titles, salaries go up, and you want to keep guys like Jefferson, Big Hill, Caleros. We paid him $600,000. When you start doing that stupid baloney stuff, you can't keep everybody, right? So, I think the offense is. You're right. The defense was pretty decent last week. It wasn't as Swiss cheese as I've grown accustomed to seeing, but man, that offense was more disgusting than those pepperoni chips, man, that they were selling at the stadium. Those were disgusting too.
They weren't good.
Overcooked and bland, and that's
terrible.
They had potential, but I think they overcooked them to crap, man. They were disgusting, and that's how that offense looked for most of the game. The only guy that I half was impressed by was Chris Reveler, and then and that's about it. I don't think Castillo couldn't even make a kick. Don't give me the chip crap. Okay, sure, maybe it affected things, but I like hearing the maraca music. You didn't hear that much on the weekend. Just it looked so pathetic, and I don't know if again. Let's look at the whole weekend as a whole. We had 3 or 4 games that all came down to the wire, except for the Thursday nighter.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if Winnipeg's gonna. I'm really feeling Ottawa this week, honestly.
Juicy matchup here too. Last time Winnipeg played in Ottawa was the forever commemorated the Crumback. Your guy Dustin Crum there, Brandon, with the big comeback over the Bombers in that one.
That hurt, but it was sweet at the same time, man. It was weird. Fantasy and team collide.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to Ottawa, though, Drew Brown, we're expecting good things. I'm a little more reserved on him, I think, this year, just because that backup quarterback thing, where they look good in a good system and then they go somewhere else and it doesn't pan out. You're really high on their depth chart there, Trey. What are we thinking for reasonable expectation? Are we thinking Drew Brown's a guy that's going to come out this week and throw for 300 and something yards? And maybe I'll turn this to you, Brandon, because Trey kind of talked about expectations for him there. Are we thinking, maybe it's a more reserved, conservative performance from him this week, or what kind of performance do you expect from Drew Brown?
Be first. I can go first. I don't know if he's going to throw for a ton, but like I said, if you look at that receiving core, Addison, Rhymes, Hardy, and Ackland, there should be no reason the ball's hitting the ground unless as long as Brown throws in within a bubble to those 4 guys, it should be caught. Same with you got Dedmond and potentially Armstead in the backfield. Again, there's no reason why the ball should be anywhere near the ground. There should be no reason why Winnipeg's defense, did they even get an interception last week?
I thought maybe they had one on Fajardo.
Maybe, but you know what I mean. That's Fajardo's always going to throw one to Winnipeg, right? So if it's not that, it's the uprights, and he stayed away from those last week. Except for the kick returner on Winnipeg couldn't. But anyway,
that was painful.
Yeah, that hurts. So I maybe again, is he going to throw for 300-400 yards? Probably not, because we don't see that too much in the CFL. But like I said, between Addison, Rhymes, and Hardy, the sweep action they can do, the players, like, they got tons of goodies in the bag, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Trey. And you just got really good veteran guys that are well over 28 years old, who've been playing football for years and years, especially with Hardy being back. The corpse of Braylon Allison has finally returned, so we finally get to see him in action again. Ackland was always solid last year. The guy we'll talk about, he's in a one-game IR, but it still doesn't matter because they still got the other kid, Nick Martiner, who's coming out of Auburn. Really good, sure hands. Another rookie that people need to pay attention to as well. I think he's squeaking. I don't know. There was an apostrophe. You guys can tell me. That might just be the ratio type situation, I want to say. But even if he still gets a start or gets a play on there, Marner's got some good hands. So on paper, like Trey saying, they just got a really good, solid wide receiver core, veterans that know how to catch the ball and get the job done. So even if Drew Brown's going to be just more of a game manager and not really do over 290-something yards, if he does 250 or less, he could still run away with like under 250 and still like 3 touchdowns if he really wanted to. So let's hope that doesn't happen and Winnipeg plays some defense right. But, who's to say? You know what I'm saying? That plus 6.5 we'll talk about, that looks pretty enticing, I'll be honest. So.
For sure. I am so happy to see Devontae Dedmon. I know he's listed as the backup at running back, but Armstead's a game-time decision. I'm so happy to see Dedmon potentially get in there. I've been waiting for years for him to get a role in offense. Like, he's to me, he's the Brandon Banks type. He's the guy that starts out as that returner that if he gets a role on offense is going to turn into the league's leading receiver potentially one year if he has a full role there. So what did he do? He returned 2 kicks for touchdowns in the preseason. I believe he did. So let's see what he can do if he gets a shot at running back. Let's move into fantasy players.
Him real quick. He's going to be like a Lucky Whitehead, McRae kind of guy. He could be backfield and receiver, right? He's going to be expanding that field like crazy. And don't you think that's going to help? Let's call Drew Brown a rookie for argument's sake, first-time starter. That's going to help a guy where you give him that ball. That's going to put the defense, a Winnipeg defense that's usually what's a bend not break, it's going to back him up a couple steps, isn't it? So I'm really hoping they use him. But yeah, let's get to fantasy, Ryan. I know you're itching.
Yeah, let's take a look first at fantasy players we're thinking of putting in our lineups for this week, and then we'll take a look at some of these future fantasy stars here. I got 2 names for you in this game. I'm staying away from everybody on Ottawa because I have not seen them play yet. We talk about that stacked wide receiver core, and I just don't know who's going to be the go-to guy getting the ball. Is Drew Brown going to spread it around? Running back, you could get a cheap $2,500 running back there, but in Armstead, but he's a game time decision. I don't believe return yards count in the CFL fantasy website. So if somebody's looking at Devontae Dedmon and thinking he's going to return kicks and be the starting running back, and that's a reason to make him the number 1, I don't think return yards count. It's just the running back activity. I could be wrong on that, and maybe I should double check that while you guys are mentioning your guys. But I'm pretty sure that's the case. But 2 names that interest me on Winnipeg's side. We talked about them a little already. Brandon kind of mentioned them. Dalton Schoen to me at $10,000. That's an insanely good price for Dalton Schoen after his $14K for most of last season. He had 9 targets in week 1. Now Lawler's out on the injured list. If Winnipeg has a bounce back game, we talked about them being kind of thin at receiver. Oliveira's out. I think that's coming through Dalton Schoen. And I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Collaros try to force it downfield early a little bit to prove that he's getting back on track. And I think Schoen or Dembski, one of those two, is the primed for a big play from that. Also, Johnny Augustine, $2,900. I get what you're saying, Trey, about not being sold on him throughout his career. I think he hasn't gotten enough opportunities to really show us that, right? He's averaged 5.8 yards per carry. He had a couple seasons where he averaged 7, which is pretty darn good. So it's $2,900 running back. You get 5 points, you get 15 out of them. Whatever you get, it's still good value if it lets you stack your lineup elsewhere. So those are 2 guys I got my eye on in this game. Let's go to you, Trey. Anybody we haven't talked about?
No, I do like Augustine in fantasy. I know you talked about him. Cheap play. I like my fantasy players, like my women cheap. And then Drew Brown. Sorry, we're gonna get taken down for that one. Drew Brown, give me Drew Brown, man. I have a feeling he's gonna carve up the Bombers defense like Thanksgiving turkey.
How much does Drew Brown cost?
9,000.
That's pretty good. That's a good value play.
9,000.
That's pretty decent.
Sorry,
For those that
when I take straight vodka shots, I guess I say stupid. If to the one female fan we might have, I apologize.
So Johnny Augustine, who's on DraftKings for those that can play it, so all my American friends that play CFL, that's in the Discord, he doesn't even have an E on his last name. That's the disrespect that they have for Johnny Augustine. It's Johnny Augustine on DraftKings, but he's only 4,300. So he's at a great steal to have there as well, and you can throw him right in the lineup, and then you can pay up for other guys like Butler for flex. You can do things like go Alouettes for defense. You can move up to get Philpott, other players like that. So same rules apply, just like the CFL fantasy site. So if you can get him for 2.9 on CFL fantasy or 4,300 there on DraftKings, that would be the play. That way you can open up your lineup for better players to stack up. So
right on. I love having that DraftKings insight because I know people have been looking for it. So I guess you just got to come back every week now.
Set aside some time.
Hey,
I can record it and send it in, whatever.
You're invited, really, anytime you want. So,
Appreciate it.
All right, let's take a look at some of these guys from the college game here. We'll talk. Let's start with Ottawa over here. Let me find the screen. Where is the correct screen? Is it this one? Nope, that's just me. This is not what I want. This one?
Good work. That looks good.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll start with that. I don't know where the one I usually use went, so we'll go with that.
They moved it around.
I did it. There we go. Figured it out.
We got it.
All right, Brandon, who we got here?
All right, so for the Redblacks, we have Khalil Pimpleton, who is college, went to Central Michigan, same college that one Antonio Brown went to before the CTE, and he got crazy, and he went broke. So hopefully he's doing okay. Shout out to AB. I hope you're well, buddy. Stay away from
Twitter account is unreal.
Yeah, it's a crazy follow. So if you're into that, you're good. Stay away from Giselle.
Yes.
All right. But this is Khalil Pimpleton, a solid guy. He's 5'7", 175 pounds. He got to play 5 years in college. His last one was 2021 before he spent some time on the practice squads. He was on the Ravens and a few other ones as well. The last time he played was 2021, which is his last full season. So it's been a couple seasons as he's moved around what is now the UFL, but the XFL, and then practice squads. Last time he played 13 games in the last season, 62 receptions for 860 yards. He had 84 rushing yards, which is really good. And he had 305 return yards. Now, when I looked at last time, I think CFL was doing the return yards for fantasy, but that could have changed for this year. So we'll have to kind of double check.
I just double checked on that. It's I don't know about DraftKings, but on the CFL fantasy site, return touchdowns count, but not return yards.
Okay. So it won't be quite accurate because I didn't take that effect, but he did have 4 receiving touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 2 return touchdowns. So he's pretty much one of those guys. I know they've had some older players like we talked about. So guys like Justin Hardy, if he gets banged up, or you have some guys that are around, he's really good as far as like really sure hands. He's faster. He's more like a slot back type situation, though. I did see him in preseason lined up, and was the left wide receiver spot, I want to say. But he's also burning, very quick and stuff like that. So if we added the return yards, he would be averaging about 25 fantasy points per game when it comes to the CFL if he was to do that within 13 games within the season. So needless to say that if they get him in, I think he's on a 1-game IR, I want to say. It was last time I checked, or he's banged up, so he's not available for the lineup this week. So that's where you want to pivot and look at someone like a Marner or those guys that we talked about, all the veterans that are back on the team. But he's a guy that's young. He's only 24. He's got plenty of time. So if he's just establishes himself and starts catching those catches on the other side, I think he's going to be one of those guys that they can depend on, kind of like a Tyler Snead situation like we talked about last year, how he's just a catch machine. And that's what's really good when it comes to receptions. Receptions are points, and that's going to add up when it comes to CFL fantasy. So Pimpleton's one of those guys. He can rack up a lot of yards and a lot of catches, and that's what we want, just to have a consistent flow of fantasy points. And so if you can average around 25 per game, that's probably not going to happen in the bigger leagues here in the CFL. But if we, even cut that in half. That's still really solid, like 11 to 12 points. That's pretty decent for a week in CFL that you can play in pretty cheap. So that's Khalil Pimpleton, guys.
Yeah, and I think Ottawa is one of those teams. Yeah, they're kind of stacked at receiver right now, but they got a lot of injury-prone guys too, right? So when it comes next man up, maybe we see him get into the lineup there. Let me switch it over to Winnipeg and pull them up on the board. Who we got here?
All right, so I know Trey might not be happy with him because of his return duties last week, but as far as the slot back, he was, I think in preseason, he was actually in one of the wide receiver spots. So it's cool that they moved him to slot back because actually he's better with that. He's very similar to Khalil Pimpleton. So this is Ontario Wilson. He played for the Florida State Seminoles, same university that the one Keon Coleman, who just went to the Buffalo Bills, who was round 2. Really good wide receiver core, to the point to where, like, the last time he played was 2022. He really didn't even get a chance to play in 2023 because he had so many that he just decided to try to go pro. Didn't work out, had a few practice squad ones, and now he's now available here for the CFL. So in his time in 2022, he had 12 games that he played, 30 receptions, 495 receiving yards, 51 return yards, and 4 touchdowns. So he would average around 8.79 fantasy points when it comes to CFF, but in CFL, if you add the returns type situation, so it looks like the Winnipeg's kind of dependent on him to kind of be more of the kick return situation to start, but they also are giving him a shot at slot back, which I really like. So he's fast, he's shifty. He caught a few plays last week in week 1 that we got to saw there as well. So he could be a guy to where, like, if Lawler's out, something happens with Dembski or Wolotarski as they're getting older and starting getting banged up and stuff like that. You can see guys like Wilson and the kid from Connecticut, who's actually a national as well. Those guys can really kind of clean that gap up, because we were talking about how all of a sudden you lose, Rasheed Bailey. There's no Orange O'Leary anymore. There's no these pieces that were there that were nice pieces that we could just plug and play on any week. So this is a good opportunity for the Blue Bombers to have a little bit more depth and have guys that are just a little bit more shifty, or more like the Lawler situation, that can just kind of get out in the open, catch some passes, and get some yards. Let's hope he does a little bit better if he does do kick return duties, but I hope he stays in the slot back and is able to kind of be shifty, kind of like that Tyler Snead or that Jared Stearns type situation for the Blue Bombers.
I mean, he won the starting job out of training camp, right? He was a starter last week before Lawler went down. So with him out on the 6-game injured list, I have to imagine he's going to be a mainstay in the lineup for at least the next little while. All right, let's move on to, as I try to adjust these cameras again. There we go. Crushing it today. Let's move on to betting picks here, Trey. What do we got?
Well, real quick, last week, Ryan and I went 3-1 on the spread.
Nice.
Well, Adam went 2-2, and Adam's coin went 1-3. Over under though, Ryan, you did go 4-0, so congrats on that. You are really good at the over under. I hate over under, but whatever. I went 3-1.
Last year
Adam
was
went
terrible.
2-2. That's fair.
Just a comeback.
Adam went 2-2, and he did not do the coin. Ryan, did you have any prop bets that really hit hard last week that you threw on the show?
Oh, prop bets I threw on the show.
It's something that you did awesome. I can't remember.
Yeah, I threw a bunch out in the Discord. I had a couple of days where I went like 4 of 5 or 3 of 5 a couple of days. There was one game, it was the Winnipeg or it was the Hamilton Calgary game, where I went like 1 of 6 because they were all off by a couple. But yeah, I don't know. The rest of the props hit. Montreal over 19.5. I think I talked about Tyson Philpott getting a touchdown there as well. Cam Dukes getting a touchdown maybe. Was the one I liked the most. That cashed a lot of good ones. We throw them out, so make sure you join us in the Discord, because every game Trey and I are throwing out our betting picks pretty much.
And even once in a while, I'll say something crazy and it will hit too. Because last week I said take Saskatchewan minus 6.5, and that one hit at plus 260 as well.
That's wild that hit, given where things were at in that game.
It's not wild. It's not wild at all, boys. It's part of the plan. But this week, Thursday night football, Winnipeg somehow again minus 6.5. Oh, we have that wrong. I typed that in wrong.
Oh.
Winnipeg is a 6.5 favorite. I typed that in wrong. Felt that Ottawa is the home underdog, and the over-under is 65.5.
I was the one who typed this in. I'll take ownership for the mistake.
Yeah, no, I put it wrong in the Discord earlier. I'll admit that. And then for fun, the straight Ottawa money line plus 245, because you know what? I don't think Ottawa's going to lose by less than 6 points. I think Ottawa's going to win this game. So give me Ottawa plus 6.5, plus them at money line plus 245, and over under 46.5. I take the over on that one. Adam, he told us beforehand he took Ottawa to cover the 6.5, and he's taking the under. So, Ryan, what do you like in this one? Oh, and the coin said Winnipeg, for anyone who cares about Adam's coin. So, Ryan, what do you got?
I think I'd take Ottawa. I see this going one of two ways. I see Winnipeg actually having that bounce back and winning by like 30, or I see it being a close game that I could see going either direction. I lean more towards close game, so I think I'd take Ottawa to cover. I'm not confidently taking Ottawa on that money line necessarily myself, though. So I would go Ottawa to cover the spread. Over under 46.5. That's low for, I feel like, two potentially good offenses, but I think they could both struggle a little. 46.5 is so. Give me the over. Give me the over on this one as well. I'll take Ottawa and the over. Brandon, what you got?
My heart says Winnipeg, but my money says Redblacks, so I'm going plus 6.5. I'm going to stay away from the money line, and if I had to go over under, I would go over. That would be my call.
That's okay, man. More money for me on that money line.
Take it, brother. Take it.
I'm gonna pull the Mike all
3 for 3.
What does Mike do? He for a long time last year, wouldn't he bet against Winnipeg, and then they finally would win all the time? Or something like that.
Smart move.
It's reverse
psychology. I was blanking on that. Reverse psychology. But no, this was actually real psychology. I think Ottawa's going to win.
As all three of us being Blue Bombers fans, we should just keep doing this until they start winning. So I'm with it. Let's do it. Ottawa all the way for this one.
And then, you know what? A quick prop bet. I wish I knew who got the ball first, because you don't really find that out until kickoff. But first touchdown scorer, Chris Streveler at plus 450. Or Dustin Crum. I'm assuming he does the short yardage duty for Ottawa. So he's at plus 750. Either of those short yardage guys, especially with Oliveira being out, I wonder if they'll go harder with Streveler near the goal line, and same with Drew Brown near the goal line, if they'll get closer and get Dustin Crum in there, as we know he can be a scrambler as well. So I would look at both backup quarterbacks for first touchdown of the game.
Yeah, spoiler alert, I didn't mention them here, but every week I put out my top fantasy value plays on our social media. You might see the risky take of Chris Streveler for $5,000 as your quarterback there, because I think there is room for him to run in this one.
He's my third string quarterback on our one. Tell me that, because I was debating.
Do it. Quickly also looking at another prop bet. We pulled them up on FanDuel again because they got them here early. Probably my favorite player prop on this one is Zach Collaros line at 290.5 passing yards. I take the under on that. Collaros isn't traditionally a guy that throws for over 300. Receivers are banged up. He struggled in week one. I think we all kind of talked about that pre-show of that being the under on that one. Should we move on to our second game of the week here? Let's talk Montreal Alouettes visiting the Edmonton Elks. Did I get that right? Is this in Edmonton?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, perfect. For some reason, I thought it was going to be in Montreal. I'm clearly on the ball.
They have a couple games. They're upgrading their stadium. That's why they have a few.
There we go. Yeah, that makes sense. A couple of big storylines in week one was Tyson Philpott with the insane performance. He was the leading scorer in CFL fantasy with something like 36 points in that game. 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards receiving on like 8 catches for Tyson Philpott. They let go of my guy, Tevin Jones, the number 6 receiver in the CFL. I thought coming into the year, took him in the fantasy draft. He was cut a week ago. Now he's signed on the other side of this matchup with the Edmonton Elks. I haven't dropped him yet in fantasy, so we'll see. We'll see what he does switching over here. But storylines Adam sent in for us is: will Tevin Jones show the Alouettes their mistake? Can Tyson Philpott have an encore performance? And can McLeod Bethel Thompson not take so much pressure and fumble the ball? as much as he was struggling with there late in the game. Those are kind of some of the storylines that are top of mind. Brandon, what interests you most about this match?
What interests me most is the Tevin Jones news, to be honest with you, because looking, and I keep a little track of one, and I see 3 wide receivers on a 6-game IR now, including one Kyron Moore, who was a good breakout, nice receiver there. So now they have Mayala, Hergy, they got Mitchell, they still got Eugene Lewis, they still got Gittins. So, I mean, they still got a good starting 4-ish, basically. But if they need Tevin Jones just to get out there and catch the ball, I know he has a hard time learning playbooks, but if he just puts his hands out and they just get him the ball, honestly, that wouldn't hurt if he's just streaking out left or right. So maybe they can get him in for a few plays, and maybe he can kind of land on this one as well. Another one I like is the guy we'll talk about, Javon Leake. I think maybe a return situation would be pretty good for him this week as well. And then Jared Dougie is also on IR, so really just have Trey Ford and MBT. So I mean, like, if hopefully MBT stays upright, because if not, Trey Ford is doing all the work basically for this one, unless they've signed another quarterback, which I haven't seen today. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, Trey, what interests you most?
I think this game, both sides, like Montreal, they were at times kind of. They weren't explosive against Winnipeg. They did last week what I think Winnipeg's been doing for the last years. They did just enough to win in a tough game, right? We've given Winnipeg a lot of credit for that over the last 3 or 4 seasons, and I think that's what Montreal did. Now, Edmonton, too, they surprised me. They looked a lot better than I thought they were going to. I did think that Saskatchewan would steamroll them a little bit more than they did. They still got the -6.5, but I thought it would be a cakewalk, not needing an interception and then a fumble lay on all crazy last quarter like it was. Like, wasn't Saskatchewan down 10 or something? Like down a touchdown or two, something like that. So I definitely was surprised by that. So I think it's a big week too for both of them, because Edmonton could have easily won that game last week, and Montreal too. Was last week a fluke, or are they the top team in the CFL? And I think that's what we're going to find out here very shortly on Friday. Is this one Friday night? Yeah, Friday night. But also, at the same time, the Oilers are losing. Is it time for Edmonton to win? Who knows? To win? Let's see.
Someone in Edmonton needs to win, I guess.
Yeah, last week's games, I had kind of similar thoughts that, Montreal, I expect their offense to be really good this year. It was a little more reserved in that game. I was surprised that Winnipeg shut them down as well as they did for most of the game. Again, I think they got tired later in that one. But that defense for Montreal is just going to be a nightmare for everybody all season long. And I look at this matchup with Edmonton. I think the offensive line, we knew that was going to be their biggest problem coming into the year. That's the biggest problem again. McLeod Bethel-Thompson's not a runner, although apparently other old quarterbacks in the league are now runners. We'll get into that a little bit later on when we get to a certain team in Ontario. He's not. So, when that pressure comes, he's got to get that ball out quickly. MBT does. So that Montreal defense against this Edmonton offensive line, I think, is the biggest matchup in this game. To me, that's going to make a difference. And how does Edmonton kind of deal with that? Last week, Kevin Brown only got 7 carries. McLeod Bethel-Thompson threw 42 times in that game, despite them being in the lead for a little while, like we talked about. So is this just going to be the norm all season? Is MBT throwing 40 passes a game? I feel like that's traditionally been what he's been like throughout his career. I don't know. Was it the same way when he was in the USFL there, Brandon? I don't know how much you tuned in on that.
Well, MBT, yeah, he was very pass happy, which was good. I'm glad he adjusted to the U.S. game and stuff like that. But he did fairly good to the point to where he was getting his accolades and stuff like that. It's just his team went under when they merged the two together, so it was a clear way for him to come back to the Canadian League. So, which is good. I'm glad he's kind of back home. But yeah, he was very pass happy, and he has some really good receivers and really good tight ends, which is slot backs here in Canadian Football League. So he got to work. He wasn't as crazy with the fumbling and stuff like that in the USFL, but I don't know, maybe this is just a harder defenses to play, most likely in the CFL, so a little bit of harder stake, and he's back home, so people just kind of know him better than they do in the United States, so maybe he had a leg up there in the USFL last year. So
I also think the run game on the other side of the matchup is interesting, like Walter Fletcher playing his former team again, the Edmonton Elks. Edmonton's run defense shut down AJ Alouette surprisingly well last week. He had 18 carries for 40 yards. only, and we expected them to run for over 100 in that game. So they surprised me a lot there. And on Montreal's side, it also surprised me a lot to see Fletcher basically get almost the whole workload. Sean Thomas Erlington got a couple carries. Jeshua and Antwi got nothing. I expected it to be a timeshare between them. So, maybe Fletcher's their go-to guy going forward here when I expected it to be more of a split. But yeah, interesting matchup between these two teams. Let's get into the fantasy players, unless anybody's got another interesting note here to talk about. I think for me, it's a repeat from last week for Montreal. It's Tyson Philpott at $8,400. And I try not to, for the receivers, I could have just put all of last week's receivers because we crushed it with the fantasy picks on the show last week. Trey and I ended up with the same lineup, and it was a 141-point lineup. In that one, so which is probably the best total I've had in years. So I have to put Philpott back on here again, though. Last week 11 targets, 10 catches, 141 yards. I think Trey's camera froze, so we'll take him off camera here for a little bit. Drink was too strong, maybe, I don't know. 10 catches, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns. We talked about it all preseason that Tyson Philpott's going to be the guy for the Alouettes this year. And the Elks also gave up a lot of big plays in week 1 to Trevor Harris and the Riders, a team that doesn't traditionally have the big plays. So I think Philpott's primed for that. And then we talked about the Montreal defense, $9,800. Dominant against Winnipeg in week 1 with 12 fantasy points. The Elks turned the ball over a lot. They still have question marks on the O-line. I think if you take some of those cheap deals like we talked about Augustine elsewhere, spend up for the Montreal defense because I don't love very many of the cheap ones this week. Who you got in your lineup here from this game, Brandon?
Yep, so definitely taking Augustine opens up a lot more room. So even adding the Alouettes, Trey's back and he's moving, so we're good.
Oh, this gosh darn internet, guys. I don't want to get into it.
They will not be a sponsor of the show.
No.
But yeah, taking the Alouettes, 9.8, that's the way to go. Nah, man, you're good. That would be kind of the way to go. Philpott, I'm kind of the same mindset. I know you don't do it, but you play the hot hand. That's what you do in fantasy. And honestly, if Philpott's going to be putting up Jamar Chase numbers, basically the NFL version, like you got to let the good times roll. Philpott's going to be like the like shining white receiver. Like if him and Schoen are the top 2 in the league, like let the good times roll and just play him basically as well. So Philpott's a great one to get a hold of. I think Snead is teetering. I don't know if I didn't see him in the lineup or not.
He's injured right now. He left with an injury last game.
Which is fine because we got a guy we're going to talk about here in just a minute. That would be a great replacement and a cheap play as well if you want to as well. Reggie White's still in 6-game IR. Furvius is a 1-game IR. So there is some room for guys like we'll talk about. Julian Grant might be a nice little play there as well as far as a cheap play. And then Walter Fletcher, man, I mean, like if they're just going to run him into the ground, that's great because we like capacity. No one likes running back by committee. And if they're going to stick with just one guy, Fletcher would be a good, cheaper play versus a guy like James Butler and some of the other guys that are available. On DraftKings, they are still disrespecting Philpott. It's still 4,400. So really, really cheap play. So it's very easy just to throw Philpott right in there with your fantasy lineups. That will get you guys like Vernon Adams and stuff like that you could play at QB. That also gets you the Alouettes into the defense as well. And then you could play up for guys like Bagleton, Butler, things like that. So if you're playing DraftKings over for the CFL fantasy for your American player, then Philpott's a good one at 4,400. That's a steal. Whereas 8,400 is
robbery.
A respectable. Yeah, it's robbery. Whereas respectable over on the CFL fantasy website. So go get Philpott.
Trey, I know you're out and about trying to get back to your desk here. Other than Philpott and Montreal's defense, anybody between Montreal and Edmonton you're thinking of this week?
Unless you said it, so I just wanted to know what's your thoughts on Gittins, man. I have a feeling that he's gonna break out one of these days, but I don't know if it's this week or not. Did you talk about him, Ryan, when I was out?
I didn't. I would argue last week was a breakout. He had 11 targets in that game. He was one of the most targeted receivers. Didn't take it for a ton of yards. He ended up with like 60, 70 yards, I think, in the game. I think he's going to keep being MBT's go-to target. I just stay away from him more so this week because it's the matchup with Montreal's defense. That's more than anything why I've got no Elks on the list here this week.
No, fair enough. Other than that, I got just Philpott in this game. So, yeah.
All right, let's take a look at a guy who I would actually agree I would potentially consider for the even fantasy play this week at $2,500. Let's start with the Montreal Alouettes here, Brandon, and I think this is there we go. Who's this? And Trey's back at the computer, so hopefully this goes well.
Sweet, even better. So this is our guy, Charleston Rambo. Shout out to Adam for putting up the Rambo, like the movie gifts and stuff like that on there. Get the Rambo train going. Charleston Rambo originally started his time at Oklahoma. He actually played with one Caleb Williams, who was the first overall draft pick, now with the Chicago Bears. He then saw an opportunity because there was a lot. Of course, you probably heard there's a transfer portal now in the NCAA, kind of like free agency for college, where they can get paid a little bit to actually play in the university. Don't know how that is in the Canadian college level. Hopefully they get something, or maybe they get room and board and that's it. I don't know. You guys will have to teach me up on all the universities there in Canada. But Rambo is a big dude. He's 6'1", 185 pounds. I think he's almost up to 200 now, playing for Montreal. He went to Miami, where he played with a quarterback called Tyler Van Dyke. That guy, when they moved over, the offense started to open up. They got a better coach who used to be for the Florida Gators. So now the offense opened up that give Rambo more opportunity to play. So last he played is 2021. And then the year before he was the XFL, he played with the Orlando, I think it was the Guardians, the ones that went under when they merged together. But he was their top receiver for the Orlando team. So he did really, really well. But in 2021, he had 12 games, 79 receptions, 1,172 yards, and he had 7 touchdowns. So in CFL fantasy, that's 19.85 fantasy points per game. So if he's become a target monster, say if something happens with Philpott, he gets cold, or something happens to where this might be a Rambo game, this could be a potential break, especially with Snead, who is also a target hog type situation. With Snead not getting as many receptions, this opens the door now for Rambo to kind of be wide receiver 2 in Montreal, at least for the next game or two, till Snead returns to the lineup. And this also opens up Philpott. So this could be a nice 1-2. If you're doing DraftKings, that would be a nice what we call stack, where you put him and you put Philpott together, and maybe pair him with Fajardo and do like a nice little 3-stack, stuff like that, to where you can kind of move up in the lineups and get you some more money and stuff like that. So that's definitely where I would be looking forward to. Is Rambo is a certified what we call a dog, a DAWG. So he's just one of those guys to where like he gets down, he gets dirty. He's physical. He can catch the ball and he can move. And as you saw in the first game, he can get open pretty quickly. So shout out to Adam for already getting the Rambo gifts going. And let's get Charleston Rambo becoming a stud just like the rest of these guys.
Yeah, 3 targets, 2 catches, 10 yards for him in the week 1 game against Winnipeg, and lines up at that left wideout spot where Austin Mack found a lot of success last year. So I can see a lot of kind of comparisons potentially between the two. And their usage, perhaps.
Also, shout out to your charts. Edmonton was one of the leakiest when it comes to these outside receivers when we compared the defenses versus them. So this would be an enticing matchup for Rambo. Whereas I think Philpott, is on the outside on the other side, I want to say. Yeah. If not,
I
slot back, I
think so. Last year he was wide out. Mm-hmm. Let me find the depth chart.
But anyway, Edmonton's leaky is what we're getting at. So Rambo and Philpott are good plays here. But this is Charleston Rambo, who's now a Montreal Alouette, and I'm glad he's getting some play here.
Philpott is still right wide out. Perfect. All right, let me switch over to your guy here for Edmonton, which I think you mentioned earlier a little bit already.
Yep. Well, you guys know of Javon Leake. He's been in the CFL for at least a couple years now. His last time was in 2019, so he spent some time in NFL with practice squads, and then he was it the Argos that he was with? I think. Yep. So he was with the Argos previously, now with the Edmonton Elks. So he played with the College of Maryland, another same college. We'll talk about another player later on as we talk about the Tiger Cats. But he had 12 games, 736 rushing yards, 55 receiving yards. He had 804 return yards, clearly he needs to be a return specialist, and 8 rushing touchdowns with 2 return touchdowns. So needless to say, Javon Leake gets open and often. You saw it already where when he gets a little bit of leverage, he can get up the field and get a nice return for most of the teams, especially Edmonton. So he would average around 14.27 fantasy points. So he could be in contention as far as if you're looking for a cheap play. And he was always a guy that you could kind of plug in and probably get some pretty decent points just on returns alone. And if something happens with Kevin Brown, or maybe they need a little bit of extra spark, where if Kevin Brown's just not doing it, or he's a little sluggish, or he's not getting in the open spaces, Leak is a very versatile and he's very shifty with his hips, so he can definitely move out of the pocket, get open in those spots, and kind of get a few more yards. So if they need a little bit of hopefully they don't go running back by committee, but if something happens and Leak gets in the lineup as well with running back, that could be pretty nice as far as fantasy points are concerned.
Absolutely. I think he's the best return man in the CFL, and he showed it last season. All right, those are some fantasy guys to watch. What do we got on the betting lines here, Trey?
Well, back-to-back games where the home team is the dog. Edmonton +5. I hate the round number spreads, but that's okay. +5. Well, Montreal is the road favorite at -5. Over under 48. I'll just go through everything I got here. I'm going to take Montreal in the over, but if you want me to sprinkle in some side bets action here real quick, Tyson Philpott 2 touchdowns anywhere in the game is at +600 on FanDuel. Give me that one. MBT, I'll take over 265, I think, and a half. I think they might not win, but I think Bethel Thompson will definitely get some passing yards. Fajardo over 255 and a half. I like that one as well. Just for some giggles, I'll take Montreal at -10.5 at +200. I think Montreal will win by 2 touchdowns. It'll be a high-scoring game, though. I think 40-25, something like that. And you know what? Give me Gittins Jr. over 5.5 receptions as well. That's what I got in that one. Let's kick it off with you, Brandon. What do you like in this one? Oh, real quick. Adam's got Montreal in the under, and the Coins got Edmonton. I'll throw out there, and then Brandon.
So on FanDuel, it's actually a plus. It's a 4.5, so there's a little bit less juice there versus the 5. And I think you guys are using either CoolBet or 365, and then it's 5 as well on DraftKings too. I would probably not play the spread, and I'd probably move over to the over/under. I'm pretty confident that both teams could get over the 47.5, especially the way they've been scoring. Maybe Edmonton's a little leaky, but they're going to have to play from behind. That means they're going to throw it a lot. So, honestly, I would probably have the over on the 47.5, and I don't think I'm going to touch money line or spread for this game, so I'll probably just go the over.
That's not an option, but we'll let the guest do it.
Sorry. I'll take the -5 Alouettes, which is not much money, but whatever. And then I would take the -230 money line. So,
yeah, spread's fine. Just we'll keep with the spread.
Okay.
I just sprinkle some extra. If I knew we could pass, man, we've been for 4 years on
every game. These shows would end so quick.
Pass.
Take one and juice it hard.
If I knew we could pass, these shows would end on time for once.
Yeah.
That's definitely not going to end on time tonight. We'll see. All right. For me, I'm taking Montreal at -5. I'm really high on the Alouettes. I get what you've been saying, Trey, about could this be a trap game type thing for them, or I feel like in the Discord you were talking about how you could see a scenario maybe Edmonton is the underdog, based on Montreal not playing as great last week offensively, at least as we expected. I'm going to take them, though, to win this one. I think they're going to win by a decent amount here as well. I'm going to take the under, though. I'm going to differ from you guys and take the under on this one. Montreal's defense is just too strong. Like they let up less than 20 points a game against dominant offenses last year. So I think they shut it down. I think Edmonton's defense surprised me a little last week as well. So take the under on that. Some of the other props we were talking about, MBT over 265 is interesting because I think Montreal shuts him down, but also I think he's going to try to throw 40 times. And if he throws 40 times and there's garbage time in there, then yeah, I think he could hit 265. So I'd play the over on that one as well. I loved your pick of the Gittins over 5.5 receptions. I think he's going to have a lot of targets every game. And I think Tyson Philpott over 67.5 receiving yards. Lock that one in because I think he's getting some big targets once again.
Love it.
All right, moving on to game number 3 here. Who's ready for 50 Cent? That's the big news here for this game. 55,000 plus fans in attendance in this game at BC Place Stadium. The 50 Cent concert at halftime, obviously a big part of that. I think bringing in the crowd, but home opener for the Lions, you can't ask. That's got to be the biggest non-Grey Cup crowd in quite some time in the CFL, right? Like, I mean, they're the only stadium that I know of that can reach that many, maybe.
Commonwealth can.
But they haven't in a long time.
Not a long time.
So, 55,000 fans at home for the Lions. Lions coming off a loss against Toronto that I think took some people by surprise. They were expecting big things from them, and they definitely struggled a little more than we expected. Calgary, on the other hand, coming off a win over the Ticats. 2 teams we expected to be near the bottom of the standings, but Calgary managed to pull it out. So, kind of, to me, the big storyline here is which of these teams, like, I don't really know how to read week 1 for either of them. Let's go to you first, Trey. What are you most interested in this matchup?
Yeah, it's weird because Calgary, they didn't look terrible, but is that just because they played Hamilton? Or is that because they're a decent team, right? And same thing with BC. BC didn't look great at times, but is that because they played Toronto or is it because they're not great? So again, I think the deeper into the season, like when they start playing other teams, I think we had the best matchups possible for week 1. And it's almost making week 2 harder because -9 or minus, well, on FanDuel, it's down to 7.5, but we had it at 9 earlier, BC favorite. That's crazy to me, especially how they played last week, what they lost by 2 or 3 points to Toronto. And we all were talking about Toronto potentially taking a decent step back last week. I don't know. This game's interesting to me. I think both teams, with almost every team in the West losing except for Saskatchewan last week, I think both of these teams really want to win, right? Brandon?
Yep. I hope they play in the club. That's got to be first and foremost. If not, I'm going to not party like it's my birthday. I'm just going to drink my Tito straight as well with no green juice. But basically, I'm looking forward. This is like a 50,000 fans. VA better show up. So it's like that's why I'm all in for fantasy this week. VA. Big fan of Justin McGinnis. I know Ryan's also probably on that train as well. McGinnis and Tyson Philpott stack last week was tremendous, and I'm not going to stray away from it. I'm just going to keep the ball rolling. Play your hot hand. You do what you got to do in fantasy as well. But also, I think BC has a bounce back. It looks like VA is also – he's not really going out for short yardage stuff either because he's very much a running quarterback as well. So he just got to stay upright. Hopefully he doesn't get banged up. Hopefully his arm is okay, all that good stuff too. So let's hope that VA keeps at it.
That was the weird thing last
week. Wasn't Prukop their backup, then they cut him?
They cut him, and then he signed with the Elks.
And then they do VA double duty. Like, why didn't you just keep Prukop?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Going back to our talk on who the Elks had at quarterback before, Dakota Prukop's the one doing the short yardage there in Edmonton now.
Right.
Forgot about that. But yeah, that's a good point. They had Dolagala, who's like a giant and can just lean over for short yardage. Although he struggled with it at times, they had Dakota Prukop, and now last week VA was doing short yardage. He was getting creamed half the game too by his offensive line, not able to keep him upright against Toronto's defensive line there. So that's definitely a big concern. Like VA, when he's healthy, is probably an MOP candidate. And the question is how long is he actually going to stay healthy? Because I'm really not confident after what I saw last week.
Well, luckily, Ryan, we got a guy we're going to talk about in these slides that will be a good backup in case if he goes down. He's a stud. So we'll talk about him.
On the other side, I mean, Calgary looked good last week, I thought, for the most part against Hamilton. I liked what I saw from Jake Mayer. I would have ranked him as my number 4 quarterback, I think I did, after last week's performance. Biggest thing, he didn't turn over the ball. I think they do like advanced analytics grade, somebody in partnership with the CFL. Is it like PFF? I think it is doing like advanced grading of players, and Jake Mayer supposedly had the highest grade out of anybody in week 1 for his performance. I don't know enough about those analytics to know how that went in there, but he played smart football. He threw for 250 or so yards. He doesn't need to toss it downfield for that much. And he got the job done. So I want to see that kind of continue this week as well, the resurgence of Jake Mayer at quarterback for Calgary, because that's going to go a long way to making them a competitive team. Not going to lie, I know it was against Hamilton, but I'm kind of in on Calgary after last week now.
Yeah, they look good. I like their wide receivers as well, man. They got a good...
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I'm just saying, man. I just for fantasy purpose, they look good, all right? They look good. Oh, he's slowing down again. Oh, is he back? I'm not sure.
He's a little frozen. Well, yeah. We'll give him a second here. We'll pull him off camera until we see him moving around a little more again. Yeah, I mean, Calgary last week, though the defense gave up a little more than I expected to Hamilton. All right, looks like Trey's moving around again, so I think it's good.
They don't do it, Ryan. Don't fall into the trap, man. They lost. They beat Bo. They beat Bo. Don't give me that.
Bo lit it up last week, which does have me concerned. If Bo can throw for 300 against Calgary, what is VA going to be able to do to them this
400?
Week? But I liked how they used Dedrick Mills at running back as well. 87 yards, 13 carries for him. Talk about the receivers. I mean, all that Canadian talent they've got at receiver, like Clark Barnes had himself a day. Cam Eccles had himself a day in his debut. They're kind of stacked in that category. So, and you always know whether the ball is chipped or not, that Rene Paredes is going to make field goal after field goal for the Stampeders. 55,000 people at this game. That is insane.
That is wild. Yeah, that's going to be a good time. Hopefully Calgary can stand that noise. We'll see how it goes.
That's like, not to get into this discussion with you, Trey, but home field advantage. 55,000 in attendance. Does that make an impact?
How many are fair weather fans that are showing up for 50 cents and will leave at halftime?
Probably maybe half. I don't know.
That's what I mean.
I don't think they leave at halftime.
40%.
Okay, but how many are fair weather fans that might not get that crazy? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not dissing the BC fans. I don't care. Like, I don't mind BC fans, but I don't know, 55,000. I don't want to hear home field advantage out of your mouth one more time this year, Ryan. I mean, sure, 55, like great grade, and the financial impact of it, because I'm sure 50 Cent he didn't do this for free. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that it's going to help out in the long run. But, yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
We will see indeed. Moving over to fantasy players to watch in this one. I got to put VA in at quarterback again at 14,000, 23 fantasy points last week. Seems to be handling short yardage for some reason as well. So I think there's a high chance of a rushing touchdown in there, even on a scramble as well. He had 20, 30 yards rushing last week. Not to mention he's facing a team. Calgary gave up 36 rushing yards to Bo Levi Mitchell last week. That is Bo's highest single season rushing total since 2018, which is like, how does that even happen? So if he can put that up, maybe VA will run for 100. It does feel a little high risk, high reward every week because of that potential for injury if the offensive line is going to keep letting them take those hits. But I think you got to ride the hot hand with VA here. Alexander Hollins did a lot of great things last week, was most targeted, but Justin McInnis was the one with the touchdown, and he makes the list this time around. $7,900 is a steal. I actually saw McInnis in a lot of people's lineups last week. 10 targets, 7 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown. he's $5,000 cheaper than Hollins is as well, and I think is going to make a similar impact. So give me those two guys in this game. Did think about maybe Dedrick Mills against that BC run defense after they really struggled last week, and William Stanback on the other side of things as well, potentially. But I think I like some of the other running back options this week better than those guys. Brandon, who you got this week?
I'm with you. VA and McInnes stack. If we're looking at DraftKings, McInnes is still underly appreciated at 4,700, so another steal. So why aren't you playing Philpott and McInnes? Like I would just keep riding them until they get too high priced, or they just don't start doing fantasy points. So that's the way to go. VA, honestly, now's the time. I mean, with 55,000 fans, let's hope VA puts on his best performance that he's seen. So I'm going to ride with VA. Also, really digging Bagleton this week. I like Reggie. So I think it's only 9,200 on DraftKings, so it's a little cheaper. CFL fantasy, you got to pay up 11.8, but I like that. We call it a run back where you're covered on both sides of the football for fantasy, and that's one of those games where like I can see it kind of being more of a shootout type situation, especially with the fans. Maybe they'll put on a show for CFL ages for you guys. So that's why I'm hoping we can get a little Bagleton and McInnes action with VA as the quarterback this week. So that's what I'm going with.
Trey?
I don't have anyone that hasn't been said already, so we'll just move on.
All right. Well, you teased a quarterback if VA does get injured.
Right.
Who do we got to watch here for BC this season potentially?
So let's talk about young Chase Bryce, 6'3", 235 pounds, so quite the stud. Started it at Clemson behind one Trevor Lawrence. He wasn't going to win that position anytime soon because it's T-Law is law. So then he transferred to the arch nemesis of my Carolina Tar Heels, the Duke Blue Devils, who are the rivalry. It's like Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, but very much more when it comes to like basketball and football. So there's a lot of animosity, and they're like 5 minutes across from each other. So a lot of fights ensued because of Duke versus UNC. But he was there. And then he moved on to the mountains of North Carolina, so about 5 hours away from me in Appalachian State, where he became the starter. He had last played in 2022, 12 games. He had over 2,921 passing yards. He also is a pretty decent rusher. So this is where I feel like they probably should depend on him more on the one, because he did 117 rushing yards. He had 4 rushing touchdowns. He has 27 passing touchdowns, and he only kept it down to 6 interceptions total. So if we were to put that in CFL fantasy, that's 20.71 fantasy points per game, which is really solid. So even if VA went out, I think Chase Bryce, given an opportunity, especially with these wide receivers and the chemistry, even if he just starts out with short yardage and kind of gets in the end zone to kind of prove himself that he can kind of move his legs. This is a guy has had really good mentors, whether it's Trevor Lawrence, and then really good coaches that's come from other universities that's had really good quarterbacks that now play in the NFL, like Kirk Cousins and things like that. So he's got good pedigree. He's got a really good statue. He can run. He's not afraid to stand in the pocket either. So he's explosive. So that's where Chase Bryce, that's why I think what happened with, I know you guys like Prukop and stuff like that, but maybe Chase Bryce might be the ticket that they need just in case for backup purposes. But if VA goes down and they don't like Delgado, this might be the play to put in young Chase Bryce and see how he does in the CFL level. But a really good player, really solid, good overall, can use his legs and can get open to get the play done. So this is Chase Bryce, and I think he'll be pretty decent for the Lions.
He's got to beat future West Division All-Star Jake Dolegala out for a spot according to his contract, but I don't think that's as much of a competition as the contract may warrant there on that one. Calgary side, we talked about some young wide receiver talent for them. You got another Calgary receiver on your list here.
Yep. So this is Eric Brooks. He was an absolute CFL star. He last played in 2023, which was last year. So he's fresh right out of the NCAA, decided that he didn't want to be on any practice squad. So he immediately came over into Canada to start getting some reps. And I'm glad he did. We saw him a little bit last week where he did some return duties. Didn't get open too lot, but he did get a few that one as well. So he got a few receptions last week. But he did 13 games, 60 receptions, 788 yards, 174 punt return yards. Clearly, that's why Calgary has chosen him to be their return guy. He also has 35 kickoff return yards, and he has 5 touchdowns. He would have played a little bit more, but he did get banged up the year before, so he came back from a season-ending injury where I didn't really write those down, but he was averaging about 25 fantasy points a game. He was completely just destroying people and getting open very fast. He's 5'7", 175. We talked about Malik Henry going down with injury for the season. This would be a good option if push comes to shove, where literally Eric Brooks is a plug-and-play for a Malik Henry type situation. He's explosive like Malik Henry, and I think he would be really good in a slot back situation, regardless if they put him on either side. But the return yards, I can see where they're putting him there first to kind of get him acclimated. But I feel like he would be a really good slot back for the Calgary Stampeders. So given the opportunity and crack the lineup, Eric Brooks could be an absolute stud. He averaged around 13.62 fantasy points if we made it into CFL fantasy points, which is really, really solid. It's not Phil Pot level, but I mean, it's really good as far as a study. 13 fantasy points per game. That's enough to crack into a lineup for sure.
Yeah, he was the starter at right wideout in week 1 for the Stamps there as well. So worked his way into the starting lineup there. All right, let's take a look at the betting lines on this game.
Okay. I was going to say, seeing all these college logos are making me really excited for the new football video game.
Man, I'm going to
So,
have no life. No life.
I don't have one already, so it's okay. But this is a big one. Big line, biggest line of the weekend, right? -9 is what I have. It's down to -7.5 on FanDuel right now for BC. And the over-under is 50.5. Pretty decent size over-under. Adam took Calgary to cover that, but I believe he still thinks BC is going to win, and he took under 50.5. Do you think they did 50 on purpose for 50 Cent?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Probably.
And on that one, and the coin took BC to win by more than 9. So, yeah, but the way I like it, I'm going to take BC -9 and BC money line. And a couple other things I like. VA, passing yards 300.5. Take the over, as well as over 2.5 passing touchdowns. And they also have the CFL big play special on FanDuel. This one tickled my interest here. A big play, 20-yard rush or 20-yard plus rush or 30-plus yard reception. Give me BC's going to get 4 or more, and the odds are at +250. So give me that one. I think they're going to have they're going to electrify whatever fans are still there after halftime.
What are you taking on the over-under? I don't think you mentioned that.
Give me the over. I think there'll be I could see BC scoring 40 of the 50 points, honestly, in this one. So, over. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm going to take – I hate this line so much. I hate when the spread is big. I hate when the over-under is either a high total or a really low one because I know I'm going to get it wrong. But give me Calgary to –
coming from the guy who swept last week, you're complaining.
Yeah, exactly.
I hate it, but I'll give 4 now. It's whatever.
Yeah. That was a rare moment, and I know it's going to come crashing down. So I'm going to take Calgary to cover. I generally do that when the spread is larger like this, where I don't know, CFL is so unpredictable. I feel like it gives me more ranges of outcomes where I hit this one. So give me Calgary to cover. 50's high. I could see it going lower than that, but I will take the over as well because I think these offenses can put some points on the board like they did last week. In terms of the other bets in this game, yeah, VA over 300 is a given for me after what Bo did to them to the Stamps defense last week. I think over on both running backs. Both these run defenses were terrible last week. Calgary gave up over 110 yards to Butler, and BC gave up a bunch of yards to Kadeem Carey as well. So Dedrick Mills over 66.5. I like that. William Stanback over 57.5. I like that, especially if they're trying to take some pressure off of VA. I would also look at, receiving props for a guy like Alexander Hollins, like over 73.5 receiving yards or over 5.5 receptions. I think I'd go the over 5.5 receptions for Hollins. Feels good because I think he's getting 10, 11 targets almost every game. Yep. What you got, Brandon?
So DK is at -8, so I'll probably go the FanDuel route and go the -7.5 and take BC. And I am feeling lucky on the 50.5 because 50 cents in the building. So let me get that over 50.5. I do not care about the money line. So Trey, you pick for me, man.
Well, if you're taking BC, they're going to win then. So
Yeah, then we'll take the money line.
Yeah.
Take the line. So literally
Money.
BC across the board, guys. Let's
Yeah.
do that and we'll be over.
Nice. Like it.
The one other one I didn't mention that Trey called me out on always taking overs this week. I take the overs because it gives me a chance of hitting it till the very end. Like it sucks when it's like I'm gonna take the under and suddenly 100-yard pass on like the first play of the game, and it's like, well, now what's the fun? Like I already lost. One I would consider taking the under is Jake Mayer 259 passing yards. I could see him going slightly under on that one. But I'm not as confident as some of those other plays. All right, final game of the week here. We've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders visiting the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Trey, get the hat ready, get the Kool-Aid ready. The Kool-Aid. All right. Sunday night game, Rider in Hamilton. A couple of notes from the storyline master Adam here. Keep an eye on the depth chart. Jameer Thurman will return to Hamilton, but he was also banged up, so may not play. Things to watch for the Riders is getting sustained pressure on Bo Levi Mitchell. If they can, it should let them control the game, but if they can't, there's a lot of new defensive backs that Bo can eat up. And on the Hamilton side, Bo looked good last week, and I agree with the sentiment as well. He got a lot of drops from his wide receivers, though. Tim White dropped a couple of bad ones. Shamar Bridges, I think, dropped a couple there as well. It was weird drops last week that we don't typically see from some of those guys, which would have put him even higher on last week's totals. So, is Bo back? Let's start with that conversation. Was this a one-off against a weak Calgary defense, or is Bo back here? Trey, what do you think?
Bo was not back up more than he's just on the field. I don't want it. I don't know. I really hope he isn't, just so we can see Tua Jr. You know what I mean? That's all I want, man. I want Tua Jr. in there at halftime or, this week. But I don't know. I have no confidence in Bo. He did exactly what I said he was going to do. He's got an arm still. He just needs to reel it in. And I don't know if he's got something to prove to himself, to the haters. I don't know. But it seems like he's just overthrowing his arm, and he's going to do what every baseball pitcher does, and he's going to hurt his arm before July. Or you know what I mean? And he's going to be out, and he's going to be sitting there in a sling holding a clipboard August, September, October, November. And that's kind of my feeling on him. But on the other side, I think Trevor Harris is back. I think he was looking pretty good before he got hurt last year. And as long as he stays upright too, I'm not as happy about that old line as maybe I was this time last week. But I mean, they didn't do that bad. So they kept them up enough to get the comeback win last week. So I think both quarterbacks have something to prove this week.
I'm intrigued by James Butler. Why was he almost game time decision and then runs off for 113 yards? Like, what was? Did you have the flu, man? Like, what happened? Like, why is it a game time decision? And then you just show up and you're like, no worries, I'll just carry the ball 13 times for 119 yards and just eat up people. I'm just like, holy cow, man! Like,
traffic, wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make it.
That's probably it. That's what I'm thinking. I was just like, man, I just can't make it in Hamilton. I'll be all right. He's like, just play me in the second half, we'll be good. But I am. James Butler, yes, he's expensive, but honestly, if you play an Augustine, if you can play some value plays, like I said, Phil Potts still not that expensive. So that's Butler, as I'm definitely looking at, is like just a solid throw him in your lineup. He can be one of your captains if you want. You can be Phil Pot. I mean, there's a couple good options for you there, just because we have room to play with when it comes to the budget and stuff like that. Another one I'm intrigued by the other side of the ball, AJ Ouellette, still doing AJ Ouellette things and just carrying the rock. And that dude, he just reminds me of just one of those guys that just go up the gut and just bangs out, and he just does not care. He just reminds me, he literally is Thor. So, like, I love me some AJ Ouellette there in Sask. So, really excited for Adam and now Trey, who's now a new Riders fan, so drinking that green Kool-Aid over there. But the running backs definitely be a good option for sure. That's the ones I'm interested in. Honestly, like I really, Bo Levi Mitchell, this is my second season really watching, what was left of him last year. But, this year as far as watching him, so I don't know him like you guys do in the CFL. But when you got Tully, you have little Tua in the wings, who's like a Big Ten legend when it comes to college football, and his family has got the pedigree. That's like a Johnny Manziel type situation. Hopefully he won't bust like Manziel, but this is a big time signing. Like it really is. And then there's been so many articles, and we'll talk about him here shortly, but man, that's big time for the CFL. So if Hamilton Bo Levi, let's let him try his best. But like you said, if he gets injured and stuff like that, they have a stud that's ready to rock and roll. He really just needs to get used to it because he literally just signed on like 2 or 3 days ago. So once he gets acclimated to the CFL rules and, gets more times and more reps with the practice squad and gets in there, I think he'll be ready to rock and roll. And he's a beast. So, you guys know Bo Levi better than I do, but I'm going to stay away from him when it comes to fantasy anytime soon. So I would not.
But he's a mobile quarterback now, apparently.
For one full game until his knees break.
Yeah. Why are there no over-under props on Bo Levi Mitchell rushing yards?
Take the over immediately.
Yeah, he's rushing for 100 this week. No, I thought he looked more mobile than I've seen him probably ever before last week. He was, he made it a game late in the game a little bit there. He just got some of those drops that really would have turned the tide. Interesting note I feel like halfway through that game last week is all of his incompletions came to the receivers lining up at what I call the left side. I know that it was like the boundary and the field side, and I'm still trying to learn those terms. But I just go based off reading the depth chart left to right. Is all of his incompletions at some point in the game were to White and to Bridges on the left, and all of his passes to the right were complete. He also heavily targeted the left side. Bridges at 11 targets, White at 11 targets. So, it seemed like Bo was maybe leaning in that direction. Something wasn't quite right there. But, one good game from him. I'll give him his flowers for that. He deserves it after how much I bag on him week in and week out. Let's see what he can do again this time around. On the other side, Saskatchewan, that was a little scary last week, wasn't it? Riders, like we came in thinking they're going to dominate the Elks in that game. Maybe the odds makers got the line kind of right after all, where the Riders truly were the underdogs until the very end there, where they pulled off that comeback on that one. And I want to see more of a consistent effort. I think we talked about this in the game day chat on the Discord of like new coach, same old Riders in terms of discipline, right? Like Corey Mace comes in and somebody still gets ejected from the game. Like what is going on here? Like how does that still happen? That's the discipline is a big issue, I think, for the Riders. And if they can keep that under control, they got the guys like Harris, Alouettes, etc. Sean Bain, 3 touchdowns last week. They got the playmakers to get it done if they can stay composed for the Riders. Should we talk about fantasy players here? I like a lot of them in this game. There's a lot of potential picks to load up from in this one. I got 4 on the list, and we've talked about it. I'll talk about the 2 running backs first. AJ Ouellette, $12,400, 18 carries last week, only 40 yards against the Elks, which is a little bit surprising. I don't think there's any way he gets held to that little week in and week out, and give me a guy with that kind of usage, especially when Hamilton gave up 6.7 yards per carry to Dedrick Mills last week. James Butler, you talked about him already. Did he have the flu? Was he stuck in traffic? Why was he a game time decision? Either way, $13,300, 13 carries, 119 yards last week. He only had 1 target and he didn't score a touchdown, but he's known to get those handfuls of both of those regularly, so I like that bounce back. Trevor Harris at $12,000. He said he's back. Trey, I agree. 20.3 fantasy points last week for Trevor Harris. A stat from Jamie Nye, he completed as many 20-plus yard passes in week 1 as the entire team did in 2023. So if we're talking big plays for the betting picks, maybe if that's an option on this one. And I'm just still not sold on Hamilton's defense. On the other side, I like wide receiver Tim White at 12,800. 11 targets last week, only 6 catches. We talked about those drops. Those aren't going to happen from him every single week. And if he caught just a couple of those, he's considered one of the top receivers of the week. I think Bo tries to get back on the same page with him. I think there's some redemption there. So I like Tim White. I also like another Hamilton receiver, but I will wait to talk about him till later because I think Brandon might bring him up for us. What do you got from this game here, Trey?
Well, I agree with your running back in AJ Ouellette, of course. And then I'm going to take a shot here. I think Schaefer Baker, too. He didn't do too bad. 12.5 points or 11.2 last week. I'm very intrigued by him. I think the more Trevor Harris gets back into this offense, he'll use him, and maybe Hamilton will cover Bain a little bit, and it will leave some other guys open. And then another, because I'm certain Bo's going to overthrow it. Give me the Saskatchewan defense. They're going to scoop up that ball and, make Bo's life miserable on Sunday. And fun fact, this is the start of a back-to-back. They play next Sunday as well in Saskatchewan. So I think these two on Sunday evening as well. So, I think I think Bo is going to be staring up at that big blue sky in Hamilton and then that big blue sky in Regina next week.
I'm with him. I even like Stearns at 5.5K for a play, 9.9. He was only a little bit more. I was going to bring up Shake and Bake KSB. I think he's a good option as well. That was my demise. I put him as my captain. I got too cute. That's why I didn't get 141. I got 127. I'm close behind. FM fam, I'm coming for you this week, buddy. He did really good too. So it's going to be a tough matchup. So I like them. Like you said, both running backs on either side of the football is going to be great this week. You can stack them if you want to as well. If you're trying to get different, Emilus would be a decent option. He's 10.4, but honestly, I'd rather move up and pay for Bain if you're going to do that. He's at 13.3. Like I said, when the draft, if you get Augustine and a few other cheaper plays, you can get him in there, and it's not too bad at all. And then on DraftKings, Butler's only 9,100, so that's a bit of a steal. So he'd be worth to go and get that as well. But those are the guys I'm really looking at this week so far.
Yeah, Stearns last week was a bit of a surprise when he came out. And what did he have? Why can't I find him on my list here? 10 targets last week, Jared Stearns. Like we're talking about Bain, we're talking about KSB, we're talking about all these other guys, MLS at receiver, and then all of a sudden, like you look in the first half and it's like Bain 2 targets. Schaefer Baker 1 target, Stearns 6. It's like, what's going on? What's going on over here?
Stock up for my boy Jared Stearns. Let's go.
Yeah, I like it. Obviously, Sean Bain is going to be top of mind for a lot of people after his 3 touchdowns last week. I'm kind of staying away because they just have so many talented receivers, and it could be Bain this week. It could be MLS next week, for example. So, although Bain was the most targeted receiver in the CFL last season, so probably is going to get a decent amount of them again. Speaking of receivers in Saskatchewan, we'll start there here first for your college fantasy players to know here. There we go.
Yeah, let's talk about the Canadian native who actually got his shot first in the NCAA. Let's talk about Aju, who is a healthy scratch this week, so he will not be in the lineup. However, as we talked about, they have 4 really good receivers in Saskatchewan, so this would be a really good one. However, he's 6'2", he's 211 pounds, really good hands. He started his career in college at Clemson with Trevor Lawrence and that group as well. Just never cracked the lineup because they have so many good wide receivers that come out of there. You think about, big names and stuff like that came before him. It's just really hard to get in that starting 3 with rotation, even though he had the pedigree. He was a 5-star coming out of high school. I don't know if you guys have recruiting systems when it comes to colleges and stuff like that, but we have 24/7 sports and stuff like that. So they tell us, how the level of premier they are, and he was really highly rated. He decided to go to South Florida, but however, he only played 1 game before he got injured with the ACL. So he only played 1 game, 2 receptions, 9 receiving yards. So there is no CFL fantasy points that I can really give you. I can tell you it's a big deal that he's here because he finished up at a local community college so that they can graduate and then go ahead and get into some playing time as well. So really his last full season is 2022 because he got the injury in 2023. So now that he's fully healthy, it looks like he's back in there. He had a really good preseason from what I saw in that game when it was the Roughriders versus the Blue Bombers. So I really do like his pedigree. I think he would be a good plug and play if one of these guys like Emilus goes down. Bain, if he gets injured, seems like that. If a Juju can get into the lineup as one of the wideouts and not the slot back, I think he'd make a big difference. Really good, solid hands. And like I said, he's just one of those guys that can get up and catch it. So all you have to do for Trevor Harris is just kind of let it fly up and go past the defender, and he'll pull it down. So that's why I'm really a big fan of a Juju. I like that he finally landed somewhere nice. And then he's considered more of a national, so he counts with the ratio and stuff like that for the Roughriders as well. So that's a nice little, treat as well that he played American football, but he's back home in Canada now. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I know Adam's really high on him this year, and he didn't get in the lineup yet, but wouldn't be surprised to see him get in there at some point. I just noticed that my microphone has been like halfway across my desk this entire show, so hopefully people have been able to hear me come through clearly. I'm not editing that, so as minimal work as possible. That's the approach we take. All right, let's look at the Hamilton side. You've got two names on the list. One's one I alluded to earlier. Let's talk about Shamar Bridges.
Yeah, let's talk about Shamar Bridges. I wish this is Adam's segment right here because he loves some Shamar Bridges. He loves some Aju. The cool thing about Shamar Bridges is that he comes from what's called Division II. So that's a college, not even Division I at what we play the NCAA level. So it's to the point to where we couldn't even really play him at all when it comes to college fantasy football. Like his team doesn't register on the sites that you can play. So they never got a really chance to see it. However, I did look at some of his stats. Last he played was 2021. He actually spent some good time on the Ravens' actual starting roster. He made a lot of the preseason games, and he did get a few rotations with the Baltimore Ravens before being released here this past time when they had a few receivers that they drafted in this current draft. So Shamar Bridges unfortunately got cut. However, that leaves him in the CFL, and he worked his way into the starting lineup here for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He's 6'4", 210 pounds, so he's a big, tall receiver, can get open. All Bo Levi has to do is stay on his feet and throw it, and then he's okay. However, maybe if something happens to Bo Levi, then you got a stud waiting in the wings that could really get the football to him. So that would be a nice stack that we'll talk about. But so if he played just the 4 games, had he stretched it out for a full 12 games, it'd probably be a little bit less, but he averaged what would be about 15.8 fantasy points per game. I know last week was a bit of a disappointment because he really just didn't get it going, if that makes sense. But I think given a good breakout game, Shamar Bridges will put his name back on the map just like he did in the preseason where he earned his spot. So be on the lookout for Shamar Bridges. I think it's awesome that he comes from Division II and now he's getting him stopped to be a starting wide receiver here in the CFL. That's awesome.
Yeah, 11 targets in his first CFL game. Like, you can't ask for much better than that. Shamar Bridges' season
He'll break out eventually.
And they've already got him on some of the player props for this week, too. Not too often, I feel like you see a rookie of the CFL game already
like that. Yeah,
up on the list. So, speaking of props, speaking of betting lines for this game, Trey?
Yeah, these the bet dog makers keep disrespecting my team here. The Road Dogs, the Saskatchewan Roughriders +1 going into the donut box in Hamilton. I don't know about that. And the over-under is 48.5. I mean, geez, the donut box, talk about home field advantage. I don't know how this isn't minus 1,000 for Hamilton. Adam has his actually, Adam, surprisingly, I thought Adam would for sure take Hamilton because how much he loves Bo, but he took Saskatchewan and the under 48.5. The coin even took Saskatchewan, the best choice the coin made all day. I'm going to take Saskatchewan to win this. Give me the under 48.5, though. But for back-to-back weeks, give me Saskatchewan. Make a little magic and hit that little tab button and go -6.5 at +220. I think Saskatchewan will win by a full touchdown here on Sunday. Bo, give me the under 265.5. But Tim White will catch it over 5.5 times. And AJ will go over 70.5 yards. That's what I like. My prop bet's there. Brandon, what do you got? What do you like? You have to pick this one. It's basically a pick 'em. There's no getting out of it.
All right, no passing. All right. I'm going to take the Roughriders +1 on DK. They're +1.5 on FanDuel. I'd even be willing to take the +1.5. So give me Saskatchewan. I will take Oh, let me do the. I don't know. My gut tells me to take the under on 48 this week, so I think I'm gonna take the under. And then, of course, I'll take the Sask money line. So I'll go with that.
Ryan, buddy, what do you got here?
Just double up exactly what you had, Trey. I think I've got the same thing on all of these. I like the Riders to win this one, even though they're the underdogs, which is a bit surprising to me as well. I like the under 48.5, and I like those props you talked about. Yeah, I think Tim White catches more than 5.5. I think he's going to be targeted a whole ton. AJ Ouellette 70.5 feels like a given to me if to bounce back if he's got those 18 carries. The most interesting prop, and this isn't one I'd take, but I'd say this is my most interesting prop as we.
I'm so over this. Sorry, so you said you have the exact same thing, Saskatchewan and the under, and all my prop bets too?
And all the prop bets as well, I think. Yeah, I like Bo under 265. I like Tim White over 5.5 receptions. And I really like AJ Ouellette over 70.5. And the most interesting prop to me is the lowest odds for anytime touchdown scorer are James Butler and then backup running back Ante Litre, who scored a touchdown last week by filling in as their short yardage quarterback, despite being their running back. He lined up behind center last week instead of having Taylor Powell go and do it. They put in the backup running back for short yardage, and I thought that was interesting. I'm probably not playing that prop, but definitely a unique one to see the backup running back have the highest odds of scoring a touchdown.
Yep.
All right, those are our picks there. You've got some honorable mentions for us as well on the fantasy players to watch. We can quickly run through. Also, we didn't talk about the other one here on the Hamilton
Talk about
side.
little Tua first. Yeah, let's talk about Talia. So this is Talia Tagovailoa. He is the former college team was Alabama first. He followed his brother Tua. Of course, that was before Mac Jones, and then Bryce Young came to town. All of those which have played starting roles in the NFL. So that's hard competition. However, he did transfer over to Maryland University, same as Javon Leake. And that's where he became their conference, the Big Ten, most career passing of all time, which is really good. This past season, he had 12 games. He had 3,377 passing yards, 18 rushing yards. He even had one reception. He caught a football. He had 21 receiving yards for that one catch that he had. He has 25 passing touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns, and kept it to about 11 interceptions. So CFL-wise, that's 20.66 fantasy points per game, which is right on up there with guys like VA, Kalaris when he's actually on point and stuff like that. So that's right on up there with the best in the CFL when it comes to the quarterbacks that you can start. He's a stud. The pedigree's there, like him and his brother Tua. Excellent footwork, can get out of the pocket, can rush, and make some plays on there as well. Their dad trains them. Like he's like an actual quarterback coach that goes around the NCAA and trains quarterbacks to be better on their feet and to be able to quickly get out of the pocket and stuff like that. So both Tua and Talia know how to kind of do that. Luckily, Tua's gotten better about his falling situation. So now Tua has no more concussions and he's doing jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. Talia doesn't have that issue. So he knows how to skip the pocket and he knows how to fall already correctly. So you don't have to worry about that with Talia. So needs to say Bo Levi Mitchell is on notice, basically, if that makes sense. Like this is a huge deal, a big name, to the point where even the NFL is covering this signing to the CFL, which is a big deal. So that gives more eyes on the CFL product. So people are probably just going to tune in just to see if he can get in, basically. So, Hamilton fans will have a little bit more, people behind them, especially if Talia gets a chance to be their quarterback. So that would be really good for the CFL, to be honest with you. So keep a lookout for what we call him Little Tua, but he's a man in his own right, is what I'm getting at. He's a beast.
Yeah, and it's not like, oftentimes we get these big names just on the negotiation list and then they never end up coming here to Canada, right? Like he's signed, he's at practice right now. Well, not right now because it's like midnight Eastern time, but he was today earlier. So, that's very exciting to see him there. And you've got a list of honorable mentions here as well we can pull up and quickly just run through those ones here of guys that weren't your go-to guy for each team. Also, there was nobody from Toronto on the list. They were on a bye this week, and nobody particularly stood out to you, but you do have an honorable mention on the team.
Yeah, shout out to the Argo fans. Sorry, man. There was a guy on there. He got released, so I can't really talk about it. And you guys are on a bye, so I mean, we had to talk about other teams. But we'll talk about him real quick. Makai Polk played at Mississippi State. He played in a team where it's called the air raid system. So it's really like spread out where you have 3 receivers at the go and stuff like that. So really, really good, very fast, can catch out the point. So I was pretty stoked to see that Toronto signed him to the practice squad, and now he's now on the actual roster. So it didn't take very long. Other guys to just look out for if BC suffers an injury, there's Stanley Berryhill III, who played for Arizona, played out of the Pac-12. That's now defunct, so because other teams went elsewhere, but really good with his hands. Another guy that's like 6'2", can kind of get out and get open. So another target for BC in case something happens and Keon Hatcher can't get back after the 6 games. That's a guy to look out for. Calgary's got some really good players. They already got Cole Tucker, who you saw a little bit last game in game 1. He's more of a tight end / slot back, bigger dude, but really sure hands. He's one of those guys where you can just pull it down like you saw, get out in the end zone. And then Logan Bonner, who's on their practice squad now. I just saw he's got a 1-game IR that's going on. He's actually on the roster. He's just one of those guys that knows how to be a really good game manager, knows how to get the ball out, stuff like that. So the Stampeders are not hurting for a quarterback, especially if Jake Merritt continues to do what he's doing. But there's another guy that can kind of take over the reins. Quick shout out to Jack Cohn. He was really good at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a very prestigious college in the NCAA world. And Logan and Jack Cohn was a great what we call game manager who he wasn't flashy, but he got the ball where it needed to go. He got the touchdowns that he needed, and he got the yardage if he had to run. So I know there's ones where the Jack Cohn might have been just like an HR thing or something like that, or whatever the case may be. But honestly, Jack Cohn's got some talent. And so with him, I like Shea Patterson a lot as well. So I mean, the Roughriders has got a really good quarterback room. That's probably the most solid that I've seen out of all the CFL teams. Another shout out, Terry Wilson, who played at New Mexico. He is the 3rd string behind Strevler. He's more of a Caleros type, not so much a Strevler. Strevler's more run first, pass second. Terry Wilson's very much more like a Caleros, where he can spread the ball out. He played in a lower level competition, not Division II, but he did play against a conference that wasn't as good as far as defense. So he knows how to get the ball out. He might come up against a little bit more tougher ones in the CFL. However, he's made the roster and is now wide or QB3 there. I think he could probably prove himself. The one another one, once again, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, the rich keep on getting richer. Desmond Patton, who's just an absolute stud in the CFF community as well. Another team comes out of the Mississippi State team as well. Just really big boy, 6'3" or so, knows how to catch. Pretty much just waiting for a roster spot. But, Hamilton's got a lot of good targets that they can get out to. And then last but not least, we got Stevie Scott III. Really good. He played at the Indiana, where our buddy Curtis Roy currently attends now for college. So really good running back there as well that I think could help out in case that one, or if they just don't like Antwi anymore and they want to get a little change of pace, something happens with Walter Fletcher. Stevie Scott would be a nice plug and play and kind of get the job done too. So these are just honorable mentions, potentially could break out. You can't really see it until they get either crack the actual starting lineup or get off the practice squad. But these are guys that have been proven in the CFF world that can make a difference if they really needed to at the next level.
Awesome. Wonderful. And we're all eagerly waiting to see which guy's going to be the next Dalton Schoen from your list that goes on to be the number 1 receiver in the CFL that season.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be tough to top that one.
He was a good one, but he didn't top the charts or whatever. But I mean, there were some good ones. Dustin Crum last year did good. I mean, there's some good plays there.
For sure. Well, I think we're getting into wrapping things up here, guys. We've gone through our previews for each of the games. We've gone through our topics here. Let me pull up our good old social media slide as we get ready to wrap things up here. There it is. We'll be back again next week. Week 3 preview, same time, same place, Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern time. Subscribe over on YouTube to get notified when we go live. Follow us on social media. We're doing a lot more on social media now that the season's going on. We're on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at CF Countdown Pod. some of the things you see, you'll see going on there. Trey's doing power rankings every week. Adam's been putting polls up. This week's poll was, which game are you most looking forward to this week? The Calgary BC game was the winner there. I think people are just interested in the 50 Cent performance more than anything. I'm interested in that football game more so personally. Yeah, we've got that going on there. I've got a ton of fantasy stuff. On Thursdays, you'll see my top value plays. We talked about a number of those guys already today, but you can look forward to that over on the social media, Twitter at CF Countdown Pod, Facebook.com/CF Countdown Pod there as well. You can find me on Twitter at CooperTrooper42, just retweeting everything I post to the show account pretty much. That's it. Mike's at Mike Garrell, Adam's at Adam Stewart 1. Let's go to our guest here, Brandon. First of all, thanks for preparing all this info for us as you do every year. I love this episode every year. We should consider making your appearance on the podcast less of an annual thing and more frequent than that. If you're ever interested, just give us a call and you're invited back anytime. But in the meantime, I know you've got you're on a bit of a hiatus right now, but where can people find everything you've got going on, and when could they maybe expect to see some stuff from you again?
Sure. You can find me on social there on Twitter at CFF University. Like I said, a little bit of a hiatus, things with personal matters and job changes that's left me with not being able to do much content. I'm hoping, sometime next year we can kind of pick up the pace like we have been, so we get my podcast back up and running, where we talk about freshmen coming into colleges and playing college fantasy football and stuff like that, and kind of figuring out who's going to top those charts to kind of be the next guy up that will either make it to the CFL or the NFL. So that's what we're there for as well. But just find me there. I'm always either retweeting or something, but I'm always there. You can reach out as well. I'm also in the Discord, so I know you're going to plug the Discord as well. So go to the CFC Discord. I'm on there as well, and that's where you can probably find me the most, where I'm either in the game day chats or we're talking fantasy or we're just joking each other about whatever team's going on, basically. So that's where you can find me in the meantime until content comes out. So thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, that's really the number one selling feature of the Discord. You get a chance to chat with Brandon. Like, the rest of us are just there, but it's really, that's the selling feature. Trey, what about you? What do you all got going on?
Well, when my internet's working, you can find me at Trey Harness, link on the X. I got football, UFC, horse race, big Saturday night. It's the biggest night in harness racing in Canada, probably $4 or $5 million dished out in purse money. It's the Pepsi North America Cup, so it's a pretty big deal when Pepsi sponsors it. It's it's our version of I'd say it's our closest to our version of the Kentucky Derby. It's the best 3-year-olds. So big race. It used to be on TSN. I don't think it is anymore, but it's on YouTube for free. So check that out if you want to see that. It's the best night to get into the sport. I went and saw it live last year, and they did a behind the scenes thing. TSN and Crave did, and I didn't see me on camera, but I saw the TSN camera guys running around, and it was really cool. And it's one of the best nights to watch. So I'll post those links in there, and taking USC off this week because it's a crappy fight night, but I'll be back next week with my buddy on my other podcast. So yeah, keep that locked in. That's it.
Right on, yes. Check out everything in the TCU, the Trey Cinematic Universe. There we go.
Damn right.
I like it.
This week's sponsored by the Theodore Buffs, man. The unofficial, official Saskatchewan senior hockey team of the podcast, right, Ryan?
Yeah. We're the unofficial Canadian football podcast of the Theodore Buffaloes Hockey Club. We happen to know the president. We talked about the Discord. The link is in the episode description to join us over there. I won't rehash anything we talked about on that one already. Check out all the other great shows in our networks as well. Canadian Football Podcast Network at CF Pod Network on Twitter. Trey, Adam, and I are also all playing in the CFL Podcast Fantasy League again this year, playing for winner takes home a donation to charity. I think we all won in week 1, if I'm not mistaken, in that one. So, of course we did. I mean, Trey and I had the same winning lineup. So check out at CF Pod Network on Twitter. Check out the Alternative Football Network as well at the official AFN on Twitter or alternativefootballnetwork.com. Is it the UFL Championship this weekend?
It is.
Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, big weekend there. So I'm sure there's a lot of great content coming out in the network there as well. Thanks again to Brandon for joining us here this evening, and to everybody who tuned in, whatever platform you're listening on, we appreciate if you do the fun things like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, share the show with your friends, help us grow the show. We always appreciate that. On behalf of Trey and Brandon, I'm Ryan saying thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.